Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. Today's date, it is November 26, 2022. It's 8 a.m. in the morning. In about an hour, we've got a delivery, small delivery, less than $100, coming from Walmart, delivered, food. I just filled out, went to Amazon and filled out the return thing for that computer that I purchased, where the SSD drive broke almost immediately. It broke right at the point where, I had all my stuff transferred, all the stuff transferred over. I mean, not everything, but, because I've got all my browsers synced together, and I've got LastPass password protector and everything. So I had everything was just, and then I think I was plugging in a network cable, and the computer was running, and I think I was plugging in a network cable, and then I came back around here, and I popped up on the screen was. I think, what was it? I can't remember exactly. Fatal error. But it didn't ask me to, what I wanted to do. Not at that point. It said, we're fixing this for you. The hard drive problem. We're fixing that for you. And then it said, it did something, and then it said, okay, this may take an hour to do, this. And then after a few minutes, it said, failed. Hard drive, failed, or something, SSD drive, So anyway, I just filled out the online paperwork to come and pick up, the box. And it's using UPS, so if I get to the door in time, the UPS man will bring a label and put the label on the box, which is good because I don't have a working printer. I got one sitting over there. Well, I got it sitting there, and I'm going to try and, there it is. You can see it right there. So, I hope that the guy, actually, because if not, the UPS person will leave the label, and then I have to get the box to a UPS, pickup location. They have them located very close, but we don't have a car, and we don't have driver's licenses, and whatever. So I hope I think if I know what day the person is going to come, I may just put a thing on the door, please knock. We are here, or something like that. Give us time or something to get to the door. Something popped in my mind. Many years ago, that's when I think I was using a Commodore 64, was that it? And I'd quite often be ordering in, things for it. And that was a fun computer. The VIC-20, I had a VIC-22. That was not so much, but the Commodore 64 was and it did stuff with a small amount of memory, and it did unbelievably great stuff. I had an adapter thing that changed the thing to, I forget what size, the screen to what size, and spreadsheets, things like that looked, really neat. And the Commodore 64
You put her claws up on my legs.
Uh, the the Commodore 64 did all this with a very, very small amount of memory. It just did fantastic graphics and everything else. Now, sure, not as good as somebody, running an Apple computer nowadays, or somebody running a, latest Windows computer with $1,000, graphics card or something. But it did fantastic. And then the PC makers, when PC started coming along, they decided that, just selling you a computer wasn't enough. They wanted to sell you more and more expensive video cards. So they wrote their code or whatever for, and people, of course, I was back then saying, don't let them do that to you. You buy a computer, and then they say you need a 30. I can't remember what the numbers were. 32 gig something. Then, oh no, you need a 64 gig. Oh no, you need terabyte of and they just and people lined up and to buy these video cards. I got a grown grandson who plays video games, and I don't know how much his video cards cost, because he's into that. But they could do so much with a small amount of memory, those programmers, that but I for years I had I don't know for how long, had a Commodore 60. I had more than one though, because they were so inexpensive. I even had an SX64, and that was, I bet I could call that up here, and we could take a look at that. Let's do a search on the web. Well, let's do VIC-20 first. VIC-20 computer. Okay. VIC-20, Wikipedia. Okay, this is going to be fun. There it is. Oh my God. Looking at it gives me an erection. I mean, it really, well, not really, but you know what I mean. Now, I didn't do an awful lot with that, but if I remember correctly, that's the one that I had a card that went in there, like a cartridge, went in there, and it was spreadsheet, and it was a thing. Now, not sure if you were using, a game. Let's see, that was 1980. Release date was 1980. Lifespan was 5 years. The cost was $299, which it says the equivalent in 2021 would be $890. Discontinued in 1985. My picture's in the way. Oh. Anyway, okay, let's do, okay, I want to save that because I'll put a link to it. So I don't want to delete that. I want to go up here and go to C64. C64, cup holder, nope, computer. There we go. Here's one's on eBay for sale. Anyway, Commodore 64, Commodore 64. Simple English, just, Somebody here says, I miss the Commodore 64. Brother, I agree with you. There it is, Commodore 64, home computer, released in 1982. Cost $595. The kernel operating system, oh, it just says CPU, 1 megahertz, memory 64 kilobytes, plus a 20 kilobyte ROM, graphics. I'm going to save this. Okay, well, next we go to TRS 80. I forgot they had a color computer. The TRS 80 or whatever one. See, TRS 80 color. Oops. A lot of information here, not a good. Okay, now that's not the TRS 80 that must have been a later version of it or something. Let me do another search for TR. But by the way, they had a for the Commodore. Back to the Commodore. They had a, was it the SX64? It was a portable version of the Commodore 64. It was built in this heavy carrying case that I think could probably survive a nuclear attack or whatever. The screen was like this big. This big. You know, I'm telling you, that was the screen. I couldn't. Back then, my eyesight was okay. I couldn't hardly see anything, but you could plug it into a monitor. But that's probably part of my arthritis problem. I didn't carry that around very much, but I had one of those. Oh, I had them all. That's where all my money went for stuff like that. And young men, boys in high school or whatever, they would write the software for bulletin board software. I wrote the one for my Radio Shack Model 1 in BASIC. I didn't know BASIC, but it came with a Radio Shack manual on BASIC. And when another sysop insulted me, he said that I was stupid, which he was correct, you know, that I was stupid and everything else, and that I couldn't, you know, I couldn't do it. And I didn't ask him. I actually dialed into his system, and he jumped in to chat with me. Or maybe I hit the thing to go in, and I had bought a monitor, a modem, and I didn't really know what a modem was, really. And then I bought one that did AA, I think it was, auto answer. I didn't know what that was. And but then I wanted to use, you know, so I think I somehow got into a chat. He would jump into chat with people, and I've mentioned this before. Chew your ass out, you know. He would type on the screen, of course. Are you fucking stupid or whatever? He did that to me, because I would check into his system every, because he wrote, what was it called? A BBS program for the Radio Shack Model 1, and he was working on it all the time, which I understand. But anyway, I logged in this one day, and typing a message to him or something, or typing to somebody, and I hit enter at the end of the line, and then I went to the next thing, and he jumped in, and I forget exactly what are you fucking crazy? What the matter is? What, I'm going to kick you off my system if you do this again. And I said, what did I do wrong? I'm sorry, what did I do wrong, And he said, you don't, he says, I just set this up now that you can keep typing at the end of the line. You don't hit enter at the end of the line. You don't hit carriage return at the end of the line. And I said, I'm sorry, please forgive me, And, but anyway, then, I'm not sure if that was the time I said, well, can I ask you a question now? And I've got this modem, and it does AA, and what's that? He says, auto answer. And I said, oh, so it'll pick up the, yeah. I said, okay. So he said, so you want to do a bulletin board system? And I said, no. And, so, because I didn't have any idea of doing a bulletin board system. That's when there was I had my computer, and a modem. But that's when in Kansas City and the surrounding area there were 3 bulletin board systems. So I was like the 4th one, But, so he says, so you want to do, and I said, well, and I forget exactly how I put, I didn't know anything about it, And he said, well, okay, well, how much of a, how many drives do you have? And I don't even think it was a hard drive. It was like, how many floppy drives do you have? And the Radio Shack computer came with 360K, the big floppy drives, diskettes or whatever. And now, Radio Shack, though, with their Tandy 2000, it came out and had a 10 meg hard drive. Wow, I bought 2 Tandy 2000s, but at that point I just had a Radio Shack Model 1 with 48K of memory in it. And he said, well, okay, what you can do is, you peek into memory, and then you have to poke into memory. And I said, what? And then he said, you don't know? And I said, no. And he said, you're too stupid to do a bulletin board system. You can't do a bulletin board system. You don't have the hardware, and you don't have the knowledge to do it. And I said, okay, thank you very much. Then I opened up the book on BASIC and started with A, And then I said, okay, to answer, to get the thing to pick up. And I wrote the code for getting it to pick up the thing. And so the next day I go through the book. Okay, I can send out by this code here, by putting this code here, I can get it to say, welcome to Howard's Notebook. And then maybe later that day or the next day I could get it to ask for input your your username or something. And that's how I did that. And but that guy who had the I'm going to make this short. Okay, just let me finish this up. That guy that had the what was his BBS software called? Can't remember. He was selling it all over the world because the computers were like new, and a lot of people had Radio Shack Model 1s, and he was in Kansas City, Missouri area. That was kind of neat, He was there. I could make that's when the telephone companies, everybody, if you made a long-distance phone call, you had to take out a loan at the bank to make, and if you made a long-distance phone call inside your own state, you had to be wealthy. Really, it was just almost that bad. And then the phone company had tariffs or regulations or whatever that that it was against a law for you to add an extension phone or to run a cable or to do, anything like that. And that's a case where the government stepped in, and of course it didn't hurt them. They broke up AT&T and Bell South and whatever the things, they broke them up separately. And then each one of those became monstrously worth money, where before it was like AT&T, the hardware people, and then there was, what was it, Bell, whatever, and that was the calls that you made or whatever. Well, each one of those, they divided it up, so each one of those, and the stockholders became, wealthy. But, and of course, that's when too, when bulletin board systems came along, then I don't know if the phone company actually, well, probably they were as selfish as they were and inconsiderate and whatever. The word went out that the telephone company was going to charge, if you had a modem, that you were going to have to pay business rate, or you were going to have to pay $100 a month. I forget what the story was. It changed, And so everybody would, when they logged into bulletin board systems or whatever else was out there, the few things that were out there, you didn't want the telephone company to know that you had a modem, so they would all use fake names. And but those were the good old days. I think did I start to say, young males in high school or something, they started, writing code, and actually creating bulletin board systems. And I don't know, maybe they would be, of course, varying ages, but maybe they were 12, 13 years of age, they were sitting on fantastic bulletin board systems. I mean, these kids, I didn't think I was a kid when I was that age, either. I thought I was an adult. But I sort of was, because both my parents were alcoholics, and I was talking about a latch kid, my mother's mother, who I called Mom, she had total heart block, which, by the way, I have. But back then, that was a death penalty. I mean, that was, but she, they were divorced, not my mother and father, but my mother, her mother and father were divorced. He was a member of the Klan, actually. He was. But back then, a whole bunch of American men were members of the Klan. They were racist, and they were anti-Catholic, and they were anti-Jewish, and all this kind of stuff. But it was sort of more like a social, club. I mean, it was. But anyway, okay, my grandmother, my mother's mother, Mom, she took phenobarbital, which I don't know anything about except it's addictive. And I don't think anybody nowadays probably, they have much better stuff that you could, you could take. But she would take too much of it because it felt good or something for her. So she came for first grade for me, and she lived, with my mother and father, Jim and Betty. I never called my mother and father, mother and father. I called them Jim and Betty. But she came for the first grade. She lived. So my job was to give her at the correct time. So I was a first grader, to give her phenobarbital, and not, if she asked at other time, I controlled the phenobarbital and, gave that to her. And then, and she read to me all the great, Moby Dick, all the great books. She read them to me. And watched Arthur Godfrey. She watched Arthur Godfrey on television when television came along. And anyway, she was there for my first grade, and for the second grade she was there, and for the second grade I would wake up and she would say, you know, I don't know what, I can't remember, you know, she would say, how do you feel? And oh, I don't feel good, Mom, you know. And she'd say, oh, you better stay home. And, okay. So, and then too, that year I didn't have the mumps. I had measles. I had two versions. I guess it was a 3-day, I may be wrong, a 7-day version or something. And then I had some other things, I think. And I think when the school, Catholic school, of course, Holy Name at that time, sent a note home or something saying I needed to be at school. So then I'd wake up and I don't feel too good, you know. And Mom would say, oh, well, do you think you could go in at noon? So I'd show up for school at noon. So naturally they flunked me. So she was there from first grade, second grade, and then I think she died during my second year in the second grade or whatever. And then after that, I was home alone. And how did I get on this subject? Okay, this is going to be a 30-minute video, and I guess I need to end it at this point. Anyway, I'll put the links below to, you might, if you had a Commodore 64. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I had to bring some sex into this, right? These young boys would write BBS software, quick BBS. I can't remember I'm not sure about Wildcat. I think Wildcat might have been actually written by adults, you know. But anyway, they would. So I use, you know, I'd be using different BBS as it came out. I'd switch to something. Well, after I wrote mine, and then somebody who was a graduate of KU in telecommunications or whatever dialed into my BBS, you know, and with a fake name, you know. He said he dialed in, got into chat right away, and he said, how many, not hard drives, you know, that was out of the question. How many floppy drives do you have? And I said, none, because with the Radio Shack Model 1, you know, you had to spend $350 for an attachment thing, you know, that I think the computer could set on that, and that would then allow you to have a little more memory, not very much. I think it might have been 48K or something. But you could attach floppy drives to it, and each floppy drive cost $350. And anyway, he called in, you know, and he said, you know, I said, oh, I don't have any with floppy drives. I'm using a tape drive, you know, regular tape recorder, Radio Shack tape recorder, and that was bad. It took so long to save something, and well, there were some great stories and stuff, but so then he said, oh, well, I said, I do have an ESF, electron stringy floppy. It was a small, like a tape that would go in a telephone answering machine, sort of. But it was on an endless loop. And I had, I think, 4 of those things. And it was like, you know, and then what I could do is with the command, you know, when I wrote the code, I could tell it to store this, get the information from this floppy, Electron stringy floppy, and then put it on storage, and that, so it was kind of, I could speed things up a little bit. And I said, I'm sure you never heard of the Electron stringy floppy. And he says, yeah, I did. He said, I wrote the software for that, and I had the manual, I said, no, you didn't. And he says, I know. He says, I know it says Tom Wheeler on it, but he says I'm using a fake name because I don't want the telephone company to, charge me for whatever. And then he asked me a few more questions. Then he said, he told me he graduated from KU and a degree in electrical engineering. He said, I'd like to come over and see your. I said, well, you're welcome to come over and see it, but it's just a Radio Shack Model 1 and a tape recorder, and that's it, And he came on over, and then I showed him the printout of my thing, and that I wrote the BBS program. He said, could I have that, and I'll try to write you, and I said, a BBS program. I said, here it is, And he took it, I don't know, three or 4 days later. He said, okay, if I come over, I've written your BBS, taken your code, and he brought it over, and I looked at that, and that's when I knew, but I was never going to write code for, it was just so much better. Although he was, he's still alive, so I guess I shouldn't say he's, he was a friend, fellow amateur radio operator and stuff like that, but arrogant because he was smart. He taught at Electronic Institute also, and I'm sure he was, in my opinion, I'm sure he was not a good teacher because he was so arrogant. Because I asked him some questions, and he would just, spit out this something, and I'd say, that doesn't make any sense, what, and he couldn't or wouldn't, he wasn't trying to keep secrets or anything, but he just, and I thought, later in years when I found out he was working at, Electronic Institute, I thought, I would not want to be his student unless I was extremely, extremely smart. If I was just me, average or below average, I thought, oh, that'd be a waste of money going to having him as a teacher, Anyway, thank you for watching. If the links below are not, or if you come up with some good links, for like, about the Commodore 64 and that type of, if you find some good links, because I probably won't get them all, and I'll put some, and they may not go immediately today. I may, come back tomorrow and add more, but if you have some, and if you happen to, mention if you happen to use a VIC-20 or a Commodore 64 or, anyway, thanks for watching. Oh, wait a minute, don't touch. Please use the link above. If you use that link, it takes you to Amazon, and then if you purchase something, I will get a little commission on it. So please see if you can do that for me. Thank you very much.